The person with the most context makes the best decisions. As the leader of the company, if you don't have context, how do you make good decisions for your company? You don't. And same goes for a leader of a department. If you don't even know if your people are doing their job to the best degree possible, how can you determine what to do to make the department better, to grow the department, to grow the business? You can't. You want to have visibility into everything that's happening. Yeah, so I guess the thing that's been top of mind for me has been mistakes that less experienced leaders make when scaling. And the reason it's relevant for me is because it's not just happening in my own company at acquisition.com, but it's also happening within multiple portfolio companies that I have. And I'm lucky because I've dealt with it before. Because Gym Launch, our company, went from 0 to 7 million to 27 million to 36 million to 50 million. So like, that's a very steep growth trajectory. And when it was happening, I thought that everything was fucked up and wrong, right? And now, as it's happening again in this company, I understand what's normal, what's to be expected, and what I can do about it. So what I want to point out is the top 5 mistakes that inexperienced leaders or leaders who have never scaled quickly before make. The first one is overhiring. Why do people overhire? They overhire because there's short-term pain that you solve with a long-term solution, but then the short-term pain goes away. In the very beginning, when something's growing really quickly, everything has to be done in a very inefficient way. And so you have a ton of inefficiencies everywhere. And so the first thing people say when they see all these inefficiencies is, we need more people. Like, we're not able to do all this. This is not fathomable. Like, I can't keep doing this kind of work. So they say, cool, let me hire somebody. And then what happens is that 4 months later, when that work is no longer needed, what does that person end up doing? I experienced this in my company, Prestige Labs. We had a customer service department, and we were going to launch for the first time our entire line of supplements. And so the head of the customer service department basically said, here's how many people we're going to need. What she didn't account for was that when you launch a brand new company, when you already have an existing customer base, you're going to have way more demand in the beginning than what it kind of trickles down to and then stabilizes at. And so what happened is we brought on 20 customer service reps, and you know how many I ended up needing after that? After the first 3 months? 6. It was so bad that literally one of the customer service reps called me, and she was like, Layla, I've taken 1 email and I've been here for 7 hours. Ethically, I can't keep working here. She's like, I don't feel good that you're paying me to do nothing. And I was like, holy shit. And so, when I talked to my customer service manager, she had hired for the short-term pain. The fact that right now we have 250 tickets a day, or however many it was. Not the fact that in 2 months, we're only gonna have 50 tickets a day. And then she didn't think about, what am I gonna do with all these people once the volume settles down? A lot of people make this mistake when they are first time in the position because they don't see the pain ever ending. And the reality is it always does, because what do? You get the systems in place with your CRM or technology. You start tracking data so you have more transparency and less meetings. You get people in and up and trained, because you have all these new people. Their degree of productivity is never as high as people who've been there for a long time. They gain more productivity, more knowledge, more context. They can take more off your plates. Now what I do to protect myself from this is I ask myself, there's the 3 Ps. Is it a person? Is it a process, or is it a project? And I do this because I want to think, is this something that is going to continue to exist forever? Like, why does this work even exist right now? Is it because we don't have a process in place? Is it because we need to do a 6-month project, like a sprint? Or is it because we truly need a person that's going to fill this role? And so a lot of times I see is, first-time leaders, for example, they want to hire somebody to do this manual labor. Well, our IT guy is working on the CRM, so in 4 months, that's going to go away. So do we really want to hire a full-time employee to do that? Or do we need a contractor? Or do we need somebody that's for 3 months? Do we need surge support, right? And so a full-time employee is a one-size-fits-all solution to a very intricate problem, which is, how do you meet the demand of a growing business? The second piece is looking at a project, which is, you might have work that is in surplus for a period of time. And so is it perfect to bring on contractors or people that you only work with for 3 to 6 months? No, but if it solves the problem and you don't have to fire somebody 6 to 12 months later, it's an absolutely much better solution. And lastly is, if it is not a process problem, and it is instead a project that will never go away, that somebody else is half-assed doing right now, that if you did, would capitalize on a lot of missed opportunity for the business, maybe it is the person that you need to hire. The second thing that first-time leaders miss is they don't quickly normalize giving feedback to their teams. In fact, I call it the buddy versus boss problem. You get in, you've got a small team. You act like their buddy. And what happens is as the team gets bigger, whether you like it or not, you don't succeed unless you also act like their boss. And what's the difference between a buddy and a boss? Buddy doesn't tell you what to do. Boss gives directives. A buddy often doesn't do that. They're there for you, they support you, they encourage you, but they're not direct about what they need you to do. A lot of first-time leaders, when they come in, they do really well with a small team because they can get by being someone's buddy, and there's so much camaraderie and such a close relationship, you don't need to be direct about what you need someone to do. But what very quickly happens is that the team gets bigger, and in order to function as a leader, you must give clear directives. And if somebody has not gotten there yet, what happens is that the team doesn't know what to do, they start to lose respect for the leader, and the leader is ineffective in getting things done. I had a leader at Gym Launch that did this. This person essentially was on the team, and then over time got promoted. And then when they got promoted, there were only 3 people on the team. It was a delivery team. And then over time, there became about 11 people on that team. And what I noticed is I would go into meetings, that person was afraid to make decisions, afraid not to please everybody on the team, and afraid to even just tell people what to do. I got on a meeting with that person one day, and I reframed their role to everybody there. I said, listen, he is no longer just your buddy, he's also your boss. It doesn't mean he can't be your buddy, he's just also your boss. So here's what's gonna be different from here on forward. And here's why we have to do it that way. If people don't know what to do, when you have a big team, then people either do everything or nothing. And they either do the same work as other people or nobody does the work. And then to the second degree, they're afraid to give feedback. And so I explained, this person, the reason that they've been promoted is because they've done X, Y, and Z. And so now they're in a position where they are here to give you feedback. Are they here to be the end-all, be-all, that is the all-knowing of your performance and every potential you have as a human? No, of course not. But they are here to be a source of feedback for you. And so you need to get used to that new relationship. A way that you can, I would say, get ahead of being, the buddy versus the boss is just by being upfront about it, by telling people it's something that you need to work on, and by putting systems in place that make it easy. Something that's a great first-time system is you could just do what you call feedback Fridays. When somebody's struggling with going from a buddy to a boss, what they can do is they can say, you know what I'm gonna do? Every Friday, I'm gonna give every person on my team one piece of feedback. And what that does is it normalizes the process of giving feedback to people so that they don't associate it with being negative, but they associate it with being positive. And it also puts a commitment on the calendar so that both people are expecting it, and it's not something that is done ad hoc or once a quarter, which is absolutely not enough. Another example of this is I had a customer service department. I promoted one of the girls from within, and then I was like, cool, so I need you to work on the schedule. And so she came back to me about a week and a half later, and she said, I presented schedules, but none of them wanted to do it. And I was like, wanted to do it? We don't have a choice. This is these are the hours that we need to make the business work. What she didn't understand is that she was still operating as their buddy. As being like, do you guys want to do this? Oh, if you don't, no, we don't need to go. We don't need to go get pizza there if we don't all want to get pizza there. But the reality is, if you're their boss, you're like, this is where we're going to go get pizza, and we're going to go at 5 o'clock. It's the difference between buddy and boss. And so what did she do when I pointed out to her, you're acting like their buddy, not their boss, is she said, okay, I am rolling out a schedule, and I'm explaining to them why, which is it's not to punish you, it's to make the business better and keep promises to our customers. So we have to do it. If you are not able to do it, I understand, but we have to do it in order to work in this department. The third mistake that young and new leaders make in a fast growth company is they delegate, but they don't do quality assurance. Okay, so what happens is people finally learn how to delegate, right? They've been doing, and they're in this mode of just constantly doing, and they finally get relief. They're like, I know how to give other people tasks and responsibilities, and they feel invigorated and amazing. And then what happens is this leader starts to feel like they're too far away. What does too far away mean? Too far away means that you don't actually know how well they're doing their job. because you don't have any level of quality assurance in place to make sure that you know that they're doing what you delegated to them to the degree that you were. And so what happens when people scale is that the quality decreases because they don't have measures in place to make sure it stays the same. An example of this is in my last company, I delegated our recruiting function. I said, you know what, recruiting is kind of like one of my core to my competencies. And after I'd built the department, I said, you know, I'm going to hand it off to this person and they're going to run it. And you know, I'd put in place all the things to make sure that we did great culture interviews, great skill interviews. I'd put in all the systems. And so I felt like there's no way that this can't be followed, right? 10 months later, I was watching an interview and I said to myself, I don't think anybody's following any of the processes. So I reached out to one of the girls on the team who was new and I was like, hey, can I see the recruiting playbook that I made? Can you let me know like how's it going? Like you're still using it? And then she was like, what recruiting playbook? And I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, the thing that I spent weeks making to make sure I delegated this properly? So what had I done? Where did I go wrong? I delegated and I didn't check. I did not assure quality thereafter, which how could I do that, right? Tracking metrics and making sure that people have checklists that they have to go through. So 2 ways I like to do this now, and actually that I have visibility into our recruiting current and present day, is that 1, we track metrics of recruiting. So I can see where people are in the pipeline and where, if we're following the process, because if we're following it, we'll stick to these metrics, right? There's a difference between 2 things, right? You can make an SOP and it's just static and people just read it and say that they did it. Or you can make a living SOP, which is what I have in Asana, which is there's tasks, say there's 20 tasks to recruit a person into the company, and you have to check off and write notes in each task to indicate that you've done it. And so the reason I'm a fan of that is because if somebody does not have to take action to indicate that they have read something, it is very unlikely that they're actually going to read and do it. That's when I learned my lesson, which is I can't just delegate and forget about it. I have to delegate and follow up. Because the reality is, just like somebody who weighs themselves every day, you're the scale to your team. You are the thing that is supposed to measure them. And so if they know that you're checking in on their weight, they're much more likely to stay lean or to stay on track or to stay in adherence with the things that you've given to them. A lot of people have told me in the past, you're a really hands-on CEO, really tactical CEO. Well, ironically, if you look at some of the best CEOs in the world, they talk about how hands-on they are. They talk about how many things they're involved in, how much stuff they know. Now, is that something for everybody? Not necessarily. It's really tough. It's very demanding on your life. But if you like it and you're good at it, I think that is absolutely the way to go. You want to have visibility into everything that's happening. The person with the most context makes the best decisions. And so as the leader of the company, if you don't have context, how do you make good decisions for your company? You don't, right? And same goes for a leader of a department. If you don't even know if your people are doing their job to the best degree possible, how can you determine what to do to make the department better, to grow the department, to grow the business? You can't. It's like, how do you know you're losing weight if you don't weigh yourself, if you don't take pictures, right? There has to be some sort of way to measure to know that you're adhering to the standards that make us successful. And so I just see that a lot of people, they delegate, and then they always say the same thing. They say, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm micromanaging. I'm like, this word needs to be burned to the fucking ground. You're managing people. You're not micromanaging. Micromanaging would be if you followed up with them 10 times a day, right? Managing somebody, asking for a fucking report once a week, good Lord. If that's micromanaging, then I'm just going to jump off a cliff because that is not micromanaging. That is doing your freaking job as a manager. And if anything, it's doing it in a way that when they send you stats and reports, you encourage them and tell them how they've done a great job and then give them advice how to improve if there are areas for improvement, which is, again, you being a good boss, showing them how they can get better, which is what most people want. The fourth mistake that first-time leaders make and leaders in fast-growing companies make is that they choose hubris over humility. So I had a leader. This person was truly one of the most humble people in the entire business. I think for that reason, probably like somebody that I just like adored, like just a truly great person, just worked very hard, very quietly, never boasted about her work. And because of that, a year and a half into her career, I wanted to promote her. And so I promoted her to director of customer success. And what happened was actually crazy, is that within a week's time, she started acting completely different, right? So she went from being like, work hard, keep your head down, all these things, to like, she thought now that she had this title, and now that she was this leader, she had to be somebody else. She had to act differently than she had acted. And the irony of that is that I promoted her for the behaviors that she was exhibiting before she was a leader. Because I was looking at her and saying, you already act like a leader, therefore I would like to officially make you one. I'm not going to promote somebody and wish and hope they start acting like a leader. I promote somebody because they already act like one. It was actually a really good lesson for me because it took a few weeks of me pointing out, like, you're starting to rub people the wrong way, you've never had issues before, and all of a sudden people are complaining about you. You were kind of acting like an asshole in this meeting, like, what's going on? And finally, after about a month, we identified where it was all coming from, which was just not being sure of what to do as a leader and how to act. And so what I told her was like, I promoted you because of how you were acting, right? And who you were, not who you are right now. In fact, if you had acted like this, I wouldn't have promoted you. And so it was actually really cool because she completely turned it around, and then she regained the trust of her teammates. She gained this respect back of her team, and she absolutely regained my relationship with her and my desire to invest in her. And so, sometimes when you're a first-time leader, you feel a lot of pressure. And that pressure makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. You start acting weird, you start acting goofy, you start doing things that are not like you because you feel a lot of stress, you feel like the spotlight's on you, right? And the reality is, if you're in a leadership position for the first time, it's probably because you've already acted like a leader. And so you don't need to act like somebody you're not. Ask your boss if you feel like you need feedback. Ask your peers, ask your team, but don't feel like you have to act like this overly verbose, confident, arrogant person in order to be a leader, because that's just not it. I think the best leaders are relatable, they're kind, they put others first. There is no specific box one must fit into. And then the last mistake that first-time leaders make and leaders who are scaling up make is properly looping in the right stakeholders. Now, this sounds dry as fucking lame, but let me tell you why it's not. So when you're an individual contributor, when you don't have people who report to you, it's not your job to tell every other team and every possible leader and every possible person what's going on, what change is occurring, what new thing is happening, what happened yesterday. What is the job of somebody who's a leader is to communicate those things. And so, for example, I know for me, as my company grows and as each company I've had has grown, my level and the amount of time I spend simply communicating things continues to increase. So in the beginning, when the team is small, I might spend 5 minutes a day communicating things. Whereas right now, when my team is much bigger, I might spend 90 minutes communicating things. The same goes for leaders. And so when somebody goes from an individual contributor to a leader, the one skill that is often missed is their communication. I would say specifically looping in the proper stakeholders when they make a decision, when they make a change, when they propose a solution, when they have a conversation, when they talk to the customer. Because somebody else used to always do it for them. So it's not that they don't know how, it's that somebody else has always been doing it for them, and maybe they don't realize that now it's on them. In my last company, one of our junior leaders got promoted, and another junior leader got promoted, and they were both involved with our payment processor. And somebody, without my permission, my CFO's permission, without anybody knowing, switched our payment processor. Yes. So we had a backup payment processor, and we had our main payment processor. And somebody, without telling anybody, switched. And so the money started flowing somewhere else. And so as you can imagine, that was very frightening for me to find out that occurred with nobody telling anybody about it, and me not finding out for about 2 weeks. Why did that happen? Neither of them thought to tell anybody. Why? They hadn't yet trained themselves, right? Because they were both new leaders. And they didn't realize that it's not him and it's not, like, now you need to over communicate, right? You don't have the luxury of working in a silo once you're in a leadership position. Your commitment is to the leadership team, right? Your peers, not just the department that you're over. And so something that I have that is a trick for me and that I teach first-time leaders is, it's very simple. At the end of my day every day, I do this literally to this day, like I have it on my calendar right now, is I look at everything that happened that day and I think to myself, who do I need to let know about what? That's it. So if I have a meeting with a portfolio CEO and we make a big decision, I should probably let my portfolio leadership team know so that they can carry out and execute on those tasks. If I, like today, have a conversation with Alex and determine exactly the plan for his book launch, I should probably follow up and let my leadership team know what the final plan is, right? But what happens when somebody's been an individual contributor is they do, but they don't communicate what they've done. And so multiple perceptions happen, which is like, to other leaders on the team, you look like you don't do jack shit. Because if the tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it fall, right? If you do work and let nobody know, they assume you do no work and that you're a lazy piece of shit. Just being honest. I've seen it happen so many times. Some of the hardest working people, but they cannot articulate their work. They cannot communicate their work or showcase their work, right? So what happens? People think they don't fucking work, right? And now on the other end, maybe you communicate, but you communicate poorly and to the wrong people. People start to think that you have something against them. Because you didn't loop them in, it must mean that you hate them, that you don't like them, that you don't respect them, that you think that they're not capable, right? And so when you don't loop in the right people, you give people the perception that you think something about them or feel some type of way. And so as you can see, like, this only results in problems. And so I would say if you're a first-time leader or your company's growing really fast, just put a little note at the end of the day. Reminder to follow up. What shit do I need to communicate about what happened today? That's really what it is. And then you just send out a bunch of messages, and that's it. Here's the thing. If you have a team full of people that are in positions for the first time, or if your company is growing very fast and you've never had a fast-growing company, the main thing that you're going to notice is communication issues. Here's the thing, though. Every company that gets past 10, 15, 20 employees, what's the number one thing they're always going to tell you? What's the number one issue every quarter? What's the number one thing people want to improve? Communication. I can tell you this because as soon as my first company crossed 30 people, the first thing that everyone said when it was like, what was the constraint this last quarter? Communication. Now, it would get better, but it would ebb and flow, but it was never good enough. Why is it never good enough? Because it's never like it was when there were 10 people. It is very difficult to communicate everything and all the right things in all the right channels as you continue to grow and grow quickly. What I will say is this. You're never going to have perfect communication, and you're never going to communicate everything perfectly. You can only do your best. And so I say all of this because you're still going to fuck up. You're still going to make mistakes. The company's still not going to have perfect communication. And if you think that one day nobody is going to complain about communication, you're wrong, and you're going to be miserable. Because I can think that I've communicated perfectly. And then somebody is like, you fucking suck. And I'm like, damn. And so you're never going to be perfect. You can't hold yourself to that standard. These things are normal. And if your company's growing quickly, these things are to be expected. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you're doing something terrible. It just means that your company's growing, right? But watch out for these 5 things because these are things that you can control. You can't control how satisfied everybody in the company is always with the communication. But you can control if you properly hire and properly staff and really think about if you need those resources. And if you make sure that you come across as a buddy and a boss rather than just a buddy. You can control if you put quality assurance measures in place, aka measurement and KPIs, to make sure that your team actually executes what you delegate to the degree needed for the business to work. You can control acting like an asshole versus just continuing to be the awesome person you were before you got promoted or before you were in this position. And you can control if you loop in the proper stakeholders. Put a reminder on your calendar. This is not rocket science. This is not like, gosh, I really need these leadership skills. Guys, if you break this down, these skills are not rocket science. We're not learning how to build a rocket. We're learning how to talk to people. We're learning how to communicate with other people. I just want to put that into context for everybody that's watching this right now. This is not impossible. You don't need to be some crazy, insanely smart person to be good at what you're doing right now. You just need to do the work. And the reality is that being a leader requires more cognitive work and more conscious work than not being a leader. So that is where you're gonna have to level up. You're gonna have to think and do, not just do. And that is where a lot of this stems from, is like, you just have to think twice before you do something. Should I actually do this? Should I loop somebody else in? Is this the right thing for me to do? Should somebody else be doing this? Rather than just doing it.